It is the 31st century, and mankind is once again at war. The battlefields of the future are dominated by huge robotic war machines known as battlemechs. Piloting these awesome weapons of war are men and women, the elite of the elite, knowing that each battle could be their last. They are mech warriors.
This is the Inner Sphere. Thousands of planets colonized by humankind. Once it was united under the Star League. But for the last 300 years, it has been consumed by savage wars. Until a new enemy appeared. Mysterious invaders known as the Clans.
Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hey guys, welcome to ThisWeekInGeek.net's Future Imperfect, the sci-fi show where we take a look at all different aspects of the sci-fi fandom, be they books, movies, television, cartoons, role-play games. It could be anything in pop culture that has a science fiction flavor to it. And today, we take our adventurous crew onto the jump ship and go out into the wilds of the Inner Sphere with a goal of looking at the periphery. You're probably wondering, what the fuck is he talking about? I'm joined by my Inner Sphere instructor and mentor in this. I'm talking with my co-host,
Aaron Pollyea.
That's right. So for those of you that don't know, Aaron, obviously, he writes for Star Trek Adventures, but he's also written for other lines. And when me and Aaron first became friends, he told me he wrote for Battletech. And I'm thinking, holy shit, I love that. And we've talked Battletech back and forth, but never in an official capacity for us here on the show. So I got to thinking about it because a couple of years ago, before the pandemic hit,
In the before times.
Yeah, in the before times, if you can believe that, I bought the brand new Battletech box set from Catalyst Game Labs. They are the current holders of the IP. Previously, it was FOSSA all the way up until probably the mid-2000s, I guess. And I had loved the MechWarrior and Battletech franchise because in high school, if you guys remember an old Twig show I called Botched Roll, I talked about some of my experiences playing Battletech. And I think I called the episode The Douchebag Wars. And my experience with Battletech was with, I'll tell my story, then Aaron, you can tell. In high school, I knew this angry German guy, because that's what
German guy from Monster Squad, yeah. Well, that's scary German guy.
My microphone fell. He wanted me to call him Angry German Guy, but his real name was Thorsten. Tremendously nice guy. And he would talk about things like Clan Wolf and the Star League and all this stuff. And we talk about MechWarrior 3. And at that time, I had no idea what the fuck he was talking about. So a friend of mine, who shall remain nameless, got me a pirated copy of MechWarrior 3. I know, I'm evil. It was Windows 98. Just live with it. So I started playing this game with my friend Jarrett, and we're playing it a lot on Microsoft Gaming Zone, for those of you that remember that terrible dial-up service. So we would play this, and I then find out from Thorsten and Jarrett there's a board game, or a miniature war game would be a good way to describe it. So we started playing Battletech, and we're playing with the box set that came out in not 84 when it was Battle Droids. We got the second version where it was called Battletech with, I think, the Summoner on the cover. And we're playing it, and we're having a great time every day at lunch. And this is where MechWarrior 3 comes in again. So I'm playing this a shit ton at home. MechWarrior 3 has an amazing design lab for most of the mechs that are in the game. There's some mechs from the Clan era, which is 30, 50, whatever. There's a bunch of Inner Sphere mechs, but you can build your mechs using the parts from a mix of Inner Sphere and Clan parts, which is important because if Battletech is anything, it's a game that'll make you really good at math really fast. And I'm playing it, and I found out, or this has been my headcanon for almost 20-something years, so if anybody breaks this, you're really going to make me sad. I used to use the Mech Lab in MechWarrior 3 to field test designs I would then play in the board game. And then I found out about another program called Tech, I think it was called, and I would design other Inner Sphere or clan mechs. Our rule was you could design any tonnage as long as you weren't overwhelming with the other guy. Like, you're not going to have a 100-ton Atlas versus like a Jenner. That's not fair. But occasionally we would run fun rounds where we would put the fastest engine we could into like a Jenner, load it with like Street 4 rockets or something, and just run circles around the Atlas because it couldn't catch us anyway. You can guess how well that fight went. So long story short, we started experimenting with the board game. We played one session of the RPG, which was where we did a lot of character creation, and I don't even think we got the play. There was a card game that came out with it too. And then I find out years later there was a cartoon. You can find most episodes on YouTube. It has never been given an official release. So years and years go by. The Xbox releases Mech Assault, and I loved it, even though I think that's a divergent timeline because a lot of it doesn't make sense. And Mech Warrior 4 had a really cool arcade experience. There was like a mech pod. There's actually restoration videos on YouTube you can check out. And I started to get back in the Battletech. I actually contacted Catalyst Game Labs years ago, and they sent me a Time of War, the RPG book, and a couple of source books. And I've kind of been keeping up. Every so often, I'll buy something from Battletech. Like, I've had fans send me some of the technical readouts because those are just interesting to read about. But it's a world that's been too hard or too much information to grasp. The world is a giant info dump. And I had it described to me within the last year or two. It's Game of Thrones with walking tanks. Because there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of drama, and there's obviously war. And it's set in the 31st century, so the year 3000, and it's just something to behold. So, Aaron, how did you first get involved with the Battletech franchise? Because I know you've got obviously a big history with it, and you wrote for it. So what's your origin?
Yeah, my backstory is that I got into it fairly soon after it launched. It wasn't Battle Droids, it had just become Battletech, and I saw the box set at my local game store. I had bought it fairly quickly and started playing it. I actually had my first gatekeeping experience with Battletech players that were much older than me that didn't want me to play because I didn't have the proper miniatures at the time. That was fun. But I got into it and generally played it with my middle school and then high school friends. So yeah, I got into it fairly early on. I want to say 87, 88 is when I got into it. And back in the day, obviously the lore was a lot simpler, a lot easier. And my love for it kind of grew over time as the game itself expanded. And I only got into writing for Battletech for its 25th anniversary. And then I've been around ever since.
What year would the 25th anniversary have been?
Oh, no. You ask me that. I think it was around, oh my God, why am I completely blanking on this? I apologize. My first thing was for 25 years of art and fiction. That was the first thing that I wrote. So that would have been in 2009.
Oh, wow. So just as I was getting back into it.
Yeah, it was published in 2009. So I think I must have done most of my work in late 2008 for it. And then afterwards, my first big actual writing gig for it was Error Report 2750. And that was a Star League source book. And that was published in 2012. So a bit of a gap there, but I think I did most of my writing for that in 2010.
Okay. So the main reason we're doing this topic show, folks, for Future Imperfect is obviously Aaron has a big history with Battletech, being a fan, becoming a writer, becoming involved with the line in some capacity, mostly from the lore side of it. And that's what I want to focus on. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the side media with this, because most of my Battletech experience, as you can guess, comes from video games. And the most recent one was MechWarrior 5, which you can now get on Xbox Game Pass, by the way. Came out when I was in the hospital. There was also Harebrained Schemes brought out Battletech on PCs a couple of years ago, and it's probably the best Battletech game I've played in a really long time. There's also
I enjoyed
great
that.
DLC. Oh yeah,
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I actually have played that. I haven't played MechWarrior 5 at all, so I can't comment on that.
So my question was to Aaron when we were developing the idea for this. Okay, Battletech is a ludicrously huge universe with lore that's expansive, and there's a lot to take in. And it's a lot for a newcomer to come in, and to come into the role-playing and board game hobby. Certain things have a very low entry point. Like I think D&D is one of the easiest things, because most people just play D&D and they, in my opinion, so hot take maybe, people just assume, okay, it's medieval, there's swords, elves, fantasy, dwarves, whatever. It's your generic J.R.R. Tolkien fantasy type shit. But what people, in my experience, don't take into effect that certain settings exist, like Eberron or Ravenloft or Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms, and they don't confine to the lore. They give you this wonderful toolkit, and every DM I've ever experienced it with has never been beholden to the lore. So D&D is a gateway drug to get into role-playing games, and that's great. But when you get into Battletech, I find, unless you're just playing the miniatures game and you're just running math, it's a very intimidating system to get into and world to get into, because there's so much history. Because we've tossed around words like Inner Spear, Clan, Aerotech.
We've already said Star League,
Star League. Like, how do you break down a franchise that has this much wall of text that literally is the Library of Alexandria? How do you hand this to your average, let's say, 15, 16-year-old gamer and say, here, I want you to develop a Inner Sphere pilot who survived the Fourth Succession War, is now on a planet near the periphery and is getting ready for the invasion of the clans. You will be fighting Clan Jade Falcon. How many units do you bet in your Bachal? And what the fuck did I just say? You don't know. But that's why I'm asking, because I want more people to come into this franchise because it's so interesting.
Well, how I would approach it first is not by saying any of that.
Okay.
The best way of getting somebody in. Well, let me start by saying the ways I would not recommend getting people to start in on Battletech, because there, in my opinion, there are ways that people go, oh, this is how you should do it. And I totally disagree. The first one is the novels. There are 100+ novels that have been published for Battletech. Many of them, I feel, are not very good science fiction novels. That's probably going to get me glares from people. They might be good Battletech novels. They might do a good job of telling lore from the universe. And I think they might have very competent characters in them. Like they might be competently written, but I don't think they do well as standalone science fiction novels for somebody to read, to get into the universe, to understand it. So ignore the novels. Ignore all the games. Unless you've already played the games and you just want to play a fun robot game and you can absorb some of the lore from those, that's great. Don't get into the universe through the video games unless you are already a video gamer and love giant stompy robots. The way to get into it is very simply by looking at the box sets, the beginner's box sets, the base books that have the rules in them, because almost inevitably those books or those box sets will have a very brief summary of the lore of the universe, maybe 10-15 pages long, because it became clear as of the 25th anniversary at the very least that the universe has far too much lore in it to be easily assimilated by anyone new coming into the game. And it was becoming an issue to get new players into the game that way. So we need to have a quick briefer. These are the major eras of Battletech, and they broke down the eras to basically the Age of War, the Star League, the Succession Wars, the Clan Invasion, Fedcom Civil War, Jihad, and
the Dark
Republic
Ages, right?
of the Dark Age / Republic of the Sphere. Those are pretty much the major eras. Okay. And then in each one of those eras, you can get a little more detail going on them. But so far are you following what I've described?
Yes.
So you have these 15 pages of basic descriptions. Well, that's a great way to get into it. And the other great way to get into it is just sit down and play the game with other people that know the lore already. And while you're playing the actual board game, the actual miniatures game where you're fighting with giant stompy robots, the people around you are going to be talking smack. That's usually what happens at Battletech games. You talk smack about the factions that you like or the factions that you don't. And you slowly will start putting together pieces in your own head, even if you haven't read those 15 pages of brief. So that would be my recommendation. Those basic 15-page summary that are often in those the beginner books or the beginner box sets, or just play the game and see where it goes.
I think that's kind of how I got into it. I got into it, as I mentioned, when Thorsten started talking about it, because I played the video game and it was fine. They threw around a lot of terms I didn't understand, like, there's going to be a star of Clamex. Like, what the fuck is a star? And they're just throwing around all these words I didn't understand, but the story and the universe was so compelling to me. And it actually became a running joke in our group, because Thorsten, like I said, was totally into this. He would call us clan insults during the day. And I always found that tremendously amusing. And I have to,
fog.
Yeah, like that, or like you're a snot-nosed Sibco brat, or something like that. And I always thought, like, man, that sounds awesome. Plus, you're an angry German guy, so it sounds even more angry. And it was just fun to live through that. And then when I started getting more into MechWarrior 3 and reading all the different texts of the mechs and everything, I started to get attachments to certain units. Like one of my favorite mechs, it's an Inner Sphere mech, and then we're going to talk about some of this a little bit more, was one called the Bushwhacker, which is your default mech in MechWarrior 3. It's great.
55 tons, jack of all trades, master of none.
And then I got into about the second or third mission because I found out through a game mechanic, one of the big parts about Battletech is collecting salvage. So to the winner go the spoils. So if you kill a mech warrior or if you disable a mech on the field, sometimes you can claim salvage rights. Like, hey, I've kicked the shit out of you. I'll let you leave with your life, but you're leaving this mech in my hands. Okay, fine. Trade. So I discovered my favorite mech of all time. It's a clan mech, and it's not the Mad Cat, surprisingly, although I love that one. It's the Thor, a.k.a. the Summoner. Mm-hmm. And there's just something about that mech with its jump jets and its armament. I love it. And it felt right in my hands. So I tried to read the novels. That didn't go over so well. I tried the cartoon, and then I find out it's not canon.
Okay. The cartoon is sort of canon. I can personally say that I've made certain parts of the cartoon into canon and some of the more later source books that have been published. At least I reference characters that were from it. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's not fully canon, but there are chunks of it that are.
Yeah, like I think they explain it as it was an in-universe propaganda program.
Yeah.
Which I think that's a great way to retcon something, wink at the camera, and still have a fun piece of media be a part of your universe. So it's kind of like how Star Wars, actually not really, I guess the closest analogy I could say, how Star Wars retconned everything in the Star Wars Legends. Mm-hmm. Battletech just said, oh, it exists, but it's a propaganda program. Guess what? Another Inner Sphere trick. That's great.
Sure.
Like that. Like that's a great way to handle the IP. So, my question to you, Aaron, is I want you to give a brief history of the Inner Sphere and the Star League, all the way up to the furthest I ever got in understanding stuff was 3050 when the clans invaded. And I bought some of the Dark Ages Jihad click toys. Didn't know what the hell they did, but they looked cool. And that's all I know. So explain to me Battletech. Sell me on this.
Well, the universe. And, you know, the thing is, without having a 5-hour long brief on that, it honestly is very difficult to give even something that's 10 minutes long as a summary of the universe, but I'll do my best.
Okay.
The base pitch for the Battletech universe is it's the future of the 1980s. It is a universe where there are giant stompy robots, that corporations are not king, but are very powerful, that there's this weird pseudo-feudalistic society that has risen up. There aren't intelligent aliens. There isn't an internet. There isn't giant supercomputers or handheld computers that you run around with, except on a couple special planets, let's say. It very much is the future of the 1980s. And in that, you have battle mechs, which is the primary weapon of war for the universe. But those weren't the first things to ever be developed. Obviously, there was hundreds of years where there weren't battle mechs. So the universe tends to diverge from our timeline in the 1980s. The Soviet Union doesn't fall apart at the same time, and there's some wars on Earth that aren't exact, that make Earth not really look like ours. They invent a jump drive that allows people to travel faster than light, but it only allows them to jump 30 light years at a time, and then it takes somewhere around a week-ish to recharge your batteries. You can recharge them much faster, but it's possible to damage your batteries. So instantaneous communication across vast distances is not really possible. It becomes easier with the later invention of the HPG network, which is Hyperpulse Generator Network. But again, it's still difficult to have long-range communications. So that's why these feudalistic societies start rising up. It's very difficult to have a centralized government. And you get the rise of the Star League, which is ruled by a house named House Cameron, and they are centered on Earth, and they are generally the most powerful of the houses at the time of the rise of the Star League because they hold Earth. They hold all the planets that have been settled the longest, the most industrialized worlds, the most populated worlds. And there's 5 other major houses: Davian, Steiner, Marik, Liao, and Karita. They all generally pay lip service to specific cultures from Earth, though they are much different from the cultures on Earth that they stem from. For example, Karita pays lip service to Japanese culture, but after hundreds and hundreds of years of divergence, there's enough difference that you would only be able to really look at Karita and say, yeah, I guess there is some Japanese trappings here, but the culture has definitely drifted. The same goes for every house. And at one point, the Star League falls apart. The Star League is the unification of all these governments, these large houses. There's also the periphery, which are minor houses, and they're generally crapped on by everybody because they don't have anywhere near the same amount of power as even the great houses. The Star League falls apart with a big coup that occurs, and that is the end of the golden age of humanity, so to speak. And thus begins the next age, which is the Succession Wars, where every great house generally tries to claim the mantle of the first Lord of the Star League, and everyone says, no, it's me. And they slap each other with nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardments, all the way to the point where everyone is basically threatening to kick over into less than 20th century technology. They've slapped each other that hard. That's not to say that there isn't high-tech stuff still, but it's becoming much more rare. you get the resurgence of technology right before the clan invasion, and then the clans invade, and the clans are the remnants of the old Star League army that left the Inner Sphere because they were disgusted with everyone. And instead of upholding these high ideals of the golden age of humanity, the clans have slowly morphed into fascist military dictatorships, and they're going to come in and impose their eugenic fueled ideals upon the Inner Sphere, regardless of who they boot stomp. Then you get into the next major era, which is the FedCom Civil War, because two of these great houses allied each other through marriage, and they finally end up breaking apart. And then you have the Word of Blake Jihad era, which is right after that, where the people that run the HPG systems, Comstar, has a big schism, and they actually ended up having a break between their non-religious, scientific, corporate faction and then their actual religious faction that believed in, well, their holy right to rule humanity. And many more worlds died. The clans were beat up and down again, along with the Inner Sphere, etc., etc. And thus began the Dark Age, where you have a resurgence of a sort of House Cameron in the Republic of the Sphere that surrounded Earth. You have the same main great houses. And now we're getting into the Ill Clan era, where the clans finally have gotten their crap together and decide to truly rule over humanity and say goodbye to your culture, free births. That's the really incredibly brief overview of Battletech's lore.
Holy shit!
That's honestly not doing justice to anything that I just spoke about.
Yeah,
like I said, 5 hours.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in there that I've picked up on over the years. For example, as I've mentioned, the video game by Harebrained Schemes, Battletech came out in 2017, and that's one of the few video games that takes place before the clan invasion. Outside of actually no, even the older games had clan shit in it.
The first MechWarrior did not.
Okay, yeah, because it was before the clans.
Mm-hmm.
So the game takes place in 3025. You are a small house in the periphery, and you're a mercenary. And that's a big part of Battletech, too. They always talk about mercs.
Yes, because mercenaries are groups of hired warriors, and it's easier to have either plausible deniability by hiring mercs that aren't directly connected to your great house or your corporation or whoever, or it's better to throw away their lives as mobile sandbags rather than your loyal troops' lives.
And I always thought that was really fascinating. I thought that was an interesting way to insert an economy in the certain games. Like Battletech, you can salvage parts, you can sell parts, you can buy stuff, I think, if I'm remembering it right. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was really neat. One of the things that you mentioned there is how the Star League fell apart and the world is the universe is changing, and we're losing access to technologies. And they talk about in how you said there was a resurgence of technology just before the clans came. That's where they found in the lore I was able to research. They called it lost tech.
Yeah, it's technology that had been lost, or at least lost in the way that you could manufacture it. It might have still been around in very rare circumstances. But in general, you couldn't build it anymore. There just wasn't the resources, the skill, or the know-how to do it anymore. So yeah, they just rediscovered the Helm memory core on this one world, and it has a whole bunch of information on it, on industrial practices and whatnot. And it's effectively right before the clan invasion. And the Inner Sphere is able to tool up, not because of the clans, because they don't even know the clans are coming. It's more of the FedCom, the Federated Commonwealth, is starting up a bigger war. They are actually trying to unify the Inner Sphere, rightly or wrongly. You can decide yourself. But warfare breeds innovation, and that's what's causing this resurgence in technology before the clans actually even invade.
Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was really interesting. The fact that we live in this future where we have giant mechs, and this was an interesting thing I caught in the lore in that same Battletech game. Is the mech you start with, I think, is a blackjack, which is a type of, I want to say it's 35 tons, maybe 45 tons.
Mm-hmm.
So they talk about it in the lore how this mech has been handed down for generations. And I got to thinking, that is something I really appreciate, because you think about the cost, the skill, the labor, the parts to maintain these giant battle mechs. Some of these mechs may be a couple of 100 years old.
Absolutely.
But they still need to fight. There's one mech in the universe called the Urban Mech, which is essentially a trash can with a giant autocannon on it.
Yeah, it's a 30-ton mech. It's a light mech.
Yeah, and it's been around for hundreds of years. And I always found that really, really interesting, how it's not all shiny new. This isn't Star Trek where they're rolling out new ships every couple of years. This is, okay, so this blackjack was built in the Second Succession War. Please don't fucking ruin it. And
well, most of the mechs that you end up encountering are still being produced. They might be a design that's hundreds of years old.
That's what I meant.
Some of those chassis might be hundreds of years old, but in general, the ones that aren't being built anymore aren't being used anymore, mainly because there just aren't parts to maintain them.
Which I thought that was really cool. Like, I have this awesome Atlas killer mech. It's a 100-ton war machine. Okay, so where are you going to find the parts for the Gauss rifle? You got parts for that capacitor or that PPC cannon? No. Cool. I hope you can hit them at close range with your fists. Sure, you're 100 tons, but they may have weapons you don't see coming. And I love that idea that logistics plays a part in Battletech. It's baked into the lore, like finding lost tech cores, recovering technology, salvage, being able to maintain your unit. Hell, you may abandon a fight because you don't want to take the damage, because if this thing hits your targeting computer, you may not be able to fix it. That is fascinating to me, because I'd never seen a world or a lore go that far into thinking about the minutia of the day-to-day lives. And then one of my favorite eras in Battletech, because it's the one I understand the most yet understand the least, and again, because of my gateway being video games, was the clan era. And I remember hearing in the first video game I played was MechWarrior 3, you fight clan Smoke Jaguar. You pretty much hunt them down to extinction, which is yikes, but they're just as bad. Yikes. And then I started hearing about some of the other clans, how there's Clan Wolf in Exile, but there's Crusader clans and Warden clans. What's the difference?
Crusader clans are all about putting the boot down on the inner sphere and getting crap done. Again, I'm overly simplifying it here. Warden clans are more about taking their time and, making sure that everything is secure behind the lines before pushing on, because all of them in the end agreed that their way of life is the best. They need to enforce it on everyone else, on all of humanity, and reconstitute the Star League in their image. But it's the Crusader clans that are just much more aggressive in doing so.
Now, they have a very unique way of conducting war. Now, once again, this was so alien to me at the time, and still is. In Star Wars, for example, a Star Destroyer comes above a planet, might launch a bunch of TIE fighters, maybe a few walkers. And that's the end of the planet, either through orbital bombardment or through military might. The clans would always give you a fighting chance. They'd call you first, wouldn't they?
Yes, unless you have shown that you don't care about how they operate, and then they might not.
Okay.
They don't give you a fighting chance in general. It's a very rare occurrence where the Inner Sphere actually wins a battle against the clans through wit in their bidding against the clans.
Explain that. What is bidding?
Well, it's because the clans existed when they left the Inner Sphere. They only had X amount of material with them, both war material and industrial base that they could take with them. So when they got to where they settled, everything was precious down to, rations. So when there was fighting to be done, everyone tried to do it with the minimum amount possible. So the clans would bid and try to gain honor through bidding the lowest amount of troops that it would take to accomplish a military goal. So two different warrior, commanders might be like, hey, I can do it with a star. Well, I can do it with 4 mechs instead of a star. Well, I don't think I can do it with 4 mechs. So you can go ahead and do it with 4 mechs. And if you fail, I get to do it with 5. And I'll get the honor. But if you do it with 4, hey, sure, I get screwed, but at least we did it with 4. And that still is our win. I don't know, it's that kind of trying to minimize their own losses. So when they come into the inner sphere, they're assuming wrongly and really dumbly that the inner sphere is going to recognize this bidding. And when they say, hey, I'm going to bid only a star to take this world from you, and the inner sphere the inner sphere commander's like, well, I'm going to use everything under my command to fight you because I'm not an idiot. The clans will go, okay, well, fine, you have dishonored the bidding process and I'll just launch everything at you that I can. And clan tech was advanced compared to the inner sphere, and they generally had far more forces than the inner sphere did. And even when the inner sphere honored bidding, they would still get their butts kicked in general.
Wasn't there a rule, though, that everybody agreed to don't use nuclear weapons?
That was way back in the day, and there's many, many, many caveats to that you can get around. And actually use nuclear weapons. But yeah, it was during the Age of War where the great houses generally just acted like dickheads to each other, orbitally bombarded worlds, rendered them completely uninhabitable. Nuclear weapons were destroying whole cities. And there's certain houses like the Taurian Concordat that never signed those accords and just continue to use nuclear weapons. It's also completely legitimate to use nuclear weapons in space. So warships started disappearing fairly quickly during the Succession Wars. But yeah, you're not supposed to use biological, nuclear, or chemical weapons, but that doesn't stop everyone from doing it.
Would the clans use them?
No. In general, not. Unless I'm sure that there's an exception out there that I'm totally blanking on right now where they do it. But no, they wouldn't. In general.
One of the other things that I think separates Battletech from a lot of other sci-fi properties is we talk about the inner sphere and the clan space and what is essentially the Milky Way galaxy. Mm-hmm. And they encounter no intelligent alien life.
Unless it's a novel.
That
is only one novel, and many people don't consider it canon.
Yeah, that was the exception I wanted to talk about, because it's so weird to think we're in space, we're exploring these wondrous worlds, we're jumping light years, and there's nothing out there.
Well, nothing, asterisk. Even if you ignore Far Country, which is the novel that I'm speaking of, there is alien life. Almost every inhabited world that hasn't been heavily terraformed has native life of some sort or another on it. It's just that it's not intelligent life. So, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I always thought that was an interesting way to take your sci-fi, but it keeps it grounded in that regard. Like all you have to deal with is human politics. And I also like this. And Aaron, you're a scientist as far as I'm concerned. And you write you write a lot of space stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Battletech seems to have a wider variety of worlds and biomes than I see in all other sci-fi that isn't like Mass Effect, for example. Like, you see them fight on toxic worlds. You see them talk about worlds that don't necessarily have a breathable atmosphere. Yet in Star Wars, it's either an ice planet, a desert planet, an ocean planet, though we've never seen Mon Calamari on the big screen, yet we saw Camino, or it's Stargate SG-1, where everything looks suspiciously like British Columbia. And I found that really interesting. The fact that it leans into the science of that a little bit more than other properties do.
Yeah, and I've definitely had my hand in making sure that there's stranger environments that you can have out there, but all that has actually been baked into the rule set since the beginning. And it's mainly because this is supposed to be a huge chunk of the Orion Spur. The Orion Spur is a minor arm in the Milky Way. Like, the entire area of known space is just a dot on the map of the galaxy. Let's put it that way. It's kind of like Star Trek in that way, that everyone assumes that the Federation is huge. It is not. It is actually fairly small on the galactic scale. It's the same thing with the Inner Sphere. It's only a few hundred light years across.
Which, again, I like how it's not this galaxy spanning environment like we get from Star Wars, where they can cross the galaxy in a couple of days to a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And even in Star Wars, I've been doing some real reading into this over the past few months. By the way, big shout out to YouTube channel Eckhart's Ladder. That guy is awesome. And he did something this year or last year. And either way, it's a video on his channel talking about, well, what's outside the Star Wars galaxy? Because at the end of Empire Strikes Back, when Luke gets his mechanical hand and he's on the bridge of the nebula, or he's in the medical bay of the freighter, or whatever the fuck it is, they're looking out at another galaxy. And I always wondered, was that just artistic license? Was it just,
I think it's artistic license to me, because you can actually see that whole galaxy rotating.
Yeah.
But and then it's like, whoa, okay. No, that's not right.
They say, yeah, no. But if you read into the lore, that's another galaxy you can technically hyperspace jump to, but there's not a lot there. It's mostly just stars and a few dead planets. It's nothing. And I always found that interesting, whereas it's a huge space to playground in. Most of it hasn't been mapped, whatever. Mass Effect, there are tons of mass relays that haven't been opened yet. So the galaxy is still open, but the council space is remarkably small. Same with the terminus systems. And then there's the Perseus Vale where the Geth hang out. It's different. And Battletech, it's just humans. It's a small part of the galaxy. We got to make it home. And I really, really like that. Now, to talk about the board game, or the game itself, they build things into the game which will make you good at math, much like any board game will, or role-playing game. And I like how they have a mechanic built in where it's very technical in the regards that you can have this awesome weapon of war weighing 100 tons, will destroy entire civilizations if you really wanted to. But you can overheat and your mech will shut down. And in worst case scenario, if you alpha strike or don't manage your heat properly, boom, you blow up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That I always thought was tremendously interesting. Like the fact that you can't just keep hucking fireballs all day like you could in like D&D if you had the right spell components, or if you're a sorcerer as opposed to a wizard. It just was manage your heat, and there are ways around it. If you're fighting on an ice planet, for example, an interesting biome, maybe your internal heat engines, or maybe your heat gets a modifier. Mm-hmm. One of the things we used to do in the MechWarrior 3 video game, I'm sorry to keep bringing this up,
that's fine,
but my friend Jarrett played an asshole strategy one time. We're playing on a map. He hid in a lake.
Yeah.
And he hid just below the surface. So he could see me, but I couldn't see him. And because his torso was in the water, he could alpha strike at me, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it because his heat would dissipate so fast.
If you can't fire from water, out of water.
Yeah. But
shouldn't be able to, at least according to the rules.
Yeah, I can't remember whether he did that. I know he would use the water to his advantage for heat.
Sure. If you stand in it and the water's only up to your waist, if you have heat sinks in your legs, they act as double heat sinks. They'll dissipate extra heat.
Yeah, and I always thought that was really neat, how you can't just go ape every single round. I've blown up a few times, and it can even hurt your mech warrior inside your thing, because your guy, like, you're essentially inside a giant nuclear oven, and you could cook inside this thing. So I want to tell one story, because you were talking about playing the board game and talking smack. So one time, and this is probably the last game I played, not because I was like, go to hell. It's just school, girlfriends, everything got in the way. But we're playing on a map that has elevated terrain and forests on it. Jarrett goes into the forest or something. No, I'm in the forest because I assume I can hide in here. So I'm thinking, okay, I can hide from sensors. I can figure something out. So I decide, cool, I know where he is on the map. I'm going to go get him. So I power up, I stand up. My head is above the tree line. He's clear across the map, and very few weapons can clear the map or so many hexes. He fires his Gauss rifle, and I figure, okay, that's going to hurt if it hits. But I got enough armor. I'm in like a 75 tonner. I should survive. He rolls, perfect head hit. And I'm like, and I'm dead. I had spent the night before designing the mech because I, once again, used the mech lab thinking, all right, so he's going to have about that much armor on the... that's when I was a heavy metagamer, so I'm that jerk. I'm thinking, all right, if I use a bunch of ER medium pulse lasers, I could melt the armor off his legs, thus he falls over, and then I can just step on him and he's dead. And, you know, I win. Nope, I was wrong. And I love that about playing... When Battletech is the one game where I don't feel bad when things go snake eyes on me. And I don't know why that is. There's just something very enjoyable about it. Now, you would know this, Aaron, because you know the lore better than I do. Who are some of the major movers and shakers? Because, like, for D&D, you can name Elemenster, Count Stradvon Zarevich, Xanathar, the big beholder dude. You can name a lot of people from D&D, and there's a shit ton of Dragonlance novels. As you mentioned, there's novels for Battletech. But who are the big movers and shakers in this? Because you've mentioned the Word of Blake, you've mentioned all these houses and stuff like that. Who are some of the people who are important in Battletech? Because I know there's a guy for the Star League who's pretty important.
It all depends on the... It all depends on the era, because even inside the eras, there's different people that are important for different times. Like, to say there's one person that's super important over another, depending on the era, I don't know. That's, again, it's very tough to say because, well, for the Forgotten Realms, you can always say, oh, well, it was just Jordan and Elminster, because they're kind of timeless characters and it exists in a timeless way, the Forgotten Realms. Battletech is like centuries and centuries of time that goes by, and politics change and borders shift and dynasties rise and fall. So depending on when and where you are, there are different characters that matter. So that's not an easy question to answer, again, because of the depth of lore of this universe.
Okay, so we're starting to wrap up the hour here on the show. We've got a few minutes left. So let's say, Aaron, I am a young, impressionable gamer. I have a slight knowledge of Battletech. I have listened to this podcast, let's say.
Okay.
Shameless plug. And I have got a not unreasonable credit card limit, but also not a stupidly high one either. I have to pick 3 things to get me into Battletech, so I'll understand the lore, or at least know more about it. I can play the game. Mm-hmm. And maybe I want to play a video game, or I want to play the RPG. What do you recommend given a modest budget?
I would recommend the core box set. It's the beginner's box set. I would recommend A Time of War, which is the basic Battletech rules. And I would recommend a tech manual, just a random tech manual that you think is from an era that you might like. But I would say don't buy the tech manual until you're done reading the basic box set's lore summary. Because you might say, hey, I really like the Star League. I want to get a Star League era tech manual, which lists all the different battle mechs and units from that era. Or you might say, hey, I like the Succession Wars, so I want to get the 3025, the basic 3025 technical readout. But those 3 things I would say you want.
Okay. For me, I guess what I would recommend someone to check out is the BattleTech game from Harebrained Schemes. Like I said, it's on PC and Steam, and it goes on sale quite often. There's 3 pieces of DLC for it, and it's wonderful. And it's a great primer, but you got to be math savvy to handle a lot of it because you can end the game by going broke. So I recommend a place like Nexus Mods and just hack the hell out of it if you just want to play. Another thing I would recommend the basic box set for sure. Time of War, you can get that digitally, I'm pretty sure. Because I hang in a lot of Battletech groups, and I'm surprised how much that book goes for. Like, my God, like I'm sitting on a fortune right now, and I'm just thinking, holy crap, people pay this much? But that's the thing, though. There's so much interesting material out there. So if you buy a modest thing and you really like what's out there, there's tons of resources, be it through Catalyst Game Labs. You can go to Drive-Thru RPG. The subreddit is very nice. I find there's people always talking on there. And there are great YouTube channels that dive into the lore, dive into individual mechs. You're going to hear some funny stuff at the end of this that I was able to cut together. And there's, like I said, there's the Battletech TV show, which aired in '94, produced by Saban. I think it was, it was Saban. And
and it was cute. It was actually pretty cool. I don't know. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it's 13 episodes. The quality is not great. Shout out to the local Fox affiliate and whoever uploaded this. And if you really want to dive into it, there's some weird stuff out there. One of the first things I ever got for Battletech in the early 2000s is a company called Connect, a company who's known for building blocks and building stuff like erector sets, that sort of thing, stuff that would snap together. There was a snap together model for a Jenner and a Mad Cat. I had both, and they were very, very cool. And with the same parts, you could build 2 separate mechs from one kit. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember what the other. I think one was a Jenner and a Bushwhacker. I think one was a Mad Cat and maybe a Vulture. I'm not sure. And I always thought that was tremendously neat. There are Battletech toys. They were produced by Tyco, but they are essentially, there is one series of figures, which gives you a Axeman, a Summoner, an Elemental, which is like a personal sized mech that the clans use, and some other
power armor.
Yeah, and there's like maybe an Aerotech fighter. And then the second series came out, and it's essentially just recolors. But they're really cool. They're not the greatest design toys in the world because 1990s, it was all about gimmicks and how do we move toys. So not like the collector's grade you'd get from NECA or Metacom or, even something mid-range collector, Hasbro Lightning Collection or Star Wars Black Series, for example. But it's a wonderful property to look into. And I've always wondered why we've never gotten another stab at a Battletech TV show or movie. Because if I had HBO money, and God don't I wish, if I could make a Battletech TV show, I would put it on HBO or Amazon and throw a budget at it. And I would bring together and I would show the Succession Wars or the fall of the Star League. And each season would move the story forward either a couple of years or a couple of 100 years. So new mechs, new people, new power dynamic. And this way, everybody who's a fan of the show can see something different. Now, that's obviously pie in the sky money. So, Aaron, if you are given a budget from these giant powerhouses or some crazy Russian billionaire, we'll say, what would you like to develop for the Battletech universe to give back to the community or to get people into this IP?
Okay, well, I would definitely do a TV show. But I would do a TV show in a slightly different way than what you've described. Okay. What I would do is a PBS war documentary with interviewing people against the events that happened around them at the time.
Okay.
And framing it in that way. So you do, hey, today we're going to interview Hans Davian for the Fourth Succession War, and you have an actor that's playing him, and then they, I remember this day, this is how we planned it, and they flash into a scene that is the dramatic recreation or whatever. And that way you can get different takes on the same situation from opposing viewpoints. So you can get Maximilian Liao's opinion on Hans Davian through an interview. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like those old PBS war documentaries. And then each season's a different war or a different event in the history. And you have different actors that come in and out. I don't know. I think it would be an interesting way of framing the storytelling around it. And it could also allow some narration about the lore around it. It was on this date in 3025 when Hans Davian did so-and-so, and these are the events that occurred before the whatever. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I'm babbling here, but just a war documentary style.
All right. So, folks, I really hope we've given you something to consider, because like I said, this is an IP. It's still fairly big, but I don't think nearly enough people talk about it. So hopefully you will check some of this out. Once again, you can go to if you go to Google, just type in Cadless Game Labs Battletech /MechWarrior. If you go to Valve or Steam or whatever it is, you can buy the game. You can go to the Paradox Home Interactive. I think that's who put it out. No, Harebrained Scheme. Sorry. You can learn more about the game there, or just type it into YouTube and just look around. If you're interested now, I think you'll be interested more if you're willing to spend a little bit of money to invest in it. And since the world is changing, hopefully we can all gather around our local game stores. And that's another thing too. Do not ignore your local game stores. Do not ignore stuff on Facebook, because, for example, and I want to give a shout out to these guys, Southern Ontario Battletech, I think is their name.
Yeah.
Friendly, very friendly group of guys who say, hey, we're going to play down at the store today. Is there anybody who'd like to learn? Is anybody who wants to play?
I've gamed with them many times.
Yeah, so there are good people out there, and you don't necessarily need to paint your minis to look like, hey, here's a Legion from House Karita, or here's a Fedcom whatever. You don't have to. Like, I have 2 mechs right now. I have an Atlas and a Mad Cat that I 3D printed, just because I wanted to have something neat and I wanted something different. Hell, the first board game I played with Battletech was using cardboard cutouts. So you don't need to spend a lot of money. There are old metal miniatures. Some of those are really neat, but they are really expensive on the secondary market. So yeah, your mileage will vary. Or if there's other toys out there, look on eBay if you want to find them. Don't go to Amazon. And there's just a lot of stuff out there if you're really interested in this world. So Aaron, thank you for sharing your experiences with Battletech. I look forward to reading more stuff that you've done. And I look forward to fighting the war of the future in the 31st century. So
the future of the 1980s.
Yeah, it's trippy. All right, folks. So we're going to cut things here on Future Imperfect as we get back into the dropship and hopefully make it to the jump point. Next time on the show on Future Imperfect, we're going to talk about the Aliens franchise, because Aliens, I think, just celebrated its 35th anniversary. And we're going to talk about pretty much everything, not get too in-depth, but just talk about the franchise in general, why you should check it out if you haven't done so already, especially with the proposed Alien TV series coming to screens on potentially 2023 if the FX rumor is to be believed. So anyway, folks, until next time, we have been
Aaron Pollyea.
I've been Mike the Birdman saying... Well, why don't you take us out instead?
Hello, everybody. Duncan Fisher here. I've been invited to tell you about the wonderful tourism opportunities on Solaris 7. First off, we have legal murder.
We here at Comstar want to thank you, the customer, for your kindness in these uncertain times. While the inner sphere has never been a place of certainty, you can know that Comstar has your back in even the worst of times. Most of you became aware that, yes, we as Comstar possess extraordinary security forces and vast military projection power. Do not be alarmed at this, for we here at Comstar are armed for your benefit. And if you doubt that, I will remind you we sent the clanners packing, more or less free of charge. Because in the end, the only thing more dangerous than a warrior culture is us. Comstar, your friendly telecommunications company. And if you doubt that, well, fuck around and find out.
Self-destruct systems initiated.